He looked death in the eye and won. After being diagnosed with one of the rarest and most aggressive blood cancers known to medicine, Sam Neill became one of the very few people on Earth to survive through an experimental treatment that most oncologists considered a long shot. His own T-cells were extracted from his blood, reprogrammed in a laboratory to hunt cancer, and infused back into his body like a biological army with a single mission. It worked. The cancer was gone. He was back on set. He was writing about gratitude. He was planting vines on his New Zealand farm and watching the sun come up over the mountains he loved more than any red carpet in the world. And then, on July 13, 2026, in a Sydney hospital room, the man who once outran dinosaurs was taken by something no one saw coming. He was 78 years old. He was completely cancer-free. And he was gone. This is the story of Sam Neill, the man who was never anyone's first choice, who became everyone's favorite, and who left us just when we thought we'd gotten him back. He was born Nigel John Dermot Neill on September 14, 1947, in Omagh, Northern Ireland. His father, Dermot Neill, was a career army officer, a third-generation New Zealander who had trained at Sandhurst and served with the Royal Irish Fusiliers, eventually rising to the rank of colonel. His mother was quiet, steady, the kind of woman who held a military family together while her husband moved between postings. Young Nigel spent his first 7 years in the cold, damp barracks towns of Northern Ireland and England, surrounded by uniforms and protocol and the stiff formality that comes with a military upbringing. He later admitted he never quite fit in. In 1954, when Sam was 7, his father retired from the army and did something that would define the rest of his son's life. He took the family home. Home, for the Neills, was New Zealand, a country at the bottom of the world, a place of vast green silence and mountains that made you feel simultaneously small and free. His father took over the family business, Neill and Company, a liquor importing firm, and Sam was sent to boarding school in Canterbury. He would later describe it with his characteristic dark humor, saying the boys there were often the product of generations of inbreeding among Canterbury farming families. "You would think," he wrote, "that a cursory examination of how they bred their Corriedale sheep would have been helpful in this regard. Sadly, no." He was not the kind of boy anyone predicted would end up on a movie screen. He was quiet, slightly awkward, more interested in books and wine and the texture of the land than in performance. He studied English literature at the University of Canterbury, then drifted into a job at the New Zealand National Film Unit, making documentaries. He had no formal acting training. He had no connections. He had no particular plan. What he had was a face that carried weight, a voice that sounded like it had been aged in oak, and a stillness on camera that most actors spend decades trying to learn and never do. His first significant role came in 1977 in a New Zealand film called Sleeping Dogs. It was a political thriller, dark and tense, and it became the first New Zealand feature film to receive a theatrical release in the United States. Sam Neill was 30 years old. He had spent a decade drifting, and now, for the first time, someone was watching. 2 years later, in 1979, he crossed the Tasman Sea and appeared in My Brilliant Career, an Australian period drama that announced the arrival of a new wave of cinema from the Southern Hemisphere. Opposite a young Judy Davis, he played Harry Beecham, a wealthy landowner with quiet longing behind his eyes. The film was a critical triumph. Sam Neill was no longer a curiosity from New Zealand. He was an actor the world needed to reckon with. but Hollywood wasn't ready to welcome him with open arms. He was cast as the Antichrist in The Omen 3, The Final Conflict, in 1981, a role that showcased his ability to carry a film on his shoulders, but didn't exactly open the doors to leading man stardom. He spent the next decade doing solid, respected work. Dead Calm in 1989, where he shared the screen with a young Nicole Kidman on a sailboat in the Pacific, and The Hunt for Red October in 1990, where he played a Soviet submarine officer with understated precision. He was always good. He was always reliable. But he was never the name above the title. He once said, with the kind of honesty that makes you like someone immediately, "I've never been the first choice for anything." That was about to change in the most spectacular way imaginable. In 1992, Steven Spielberg was casting what would become the most groundbreaking blockbuster of the decade. The film was Jurassic Park. The role was Dr. Alan Grant, a paleontologist who discovers that bringing dinosaurs back to life was perhaps not humanity's best idea. Spielberg's first choice was Harrison Ford. When Ford passed, the director looked at William Hurt, then Tim Robbins. Both fell through. Sam Neill was cast just weeks before filming began. He was, quite literally, nobody's first pick. He didn't care. He showed up on set and did what he always did. He made you believe. There is a famous story from the production that tells you everything about who Sam Neill was as a performer. He had spent an entire month perfecting an American accent for the role. He arrived on set, opened his mouth, and Spielberg immediately said, "Just use your own voice." A few days later, Spielberg changed his mind again. "Somewhere in between," he said. Neill would later call this an actor's nightmare, and joked that it was the reason Dr. Grant's accent seems to wander between continents throughout the film. But here is what Spielberg also noticed. Sam Neill was the opposite of the character he was playing. Dr. Grant was famously uncomfortable around children. Sam Neill, in real life, was a deeply loving and devoted father. Spielberg later said it was a stretch for Neill to play someone so uneasy with kids, because the man behind the character was one of the gentlest fathers he had ever worked with. When Jurassic Park opened on June 11, 1993, it didn't just break records. It rewrote what movies could do. It earned over $900 million worldwide. It won 3 Academy Awards, and Sam Neill, the quiet New Zealander who had never been anyone's first choice, was suddenly one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. That same year, he appeared in Jane Campion's The Piano, playing a colonial husband in a film that would win the Palme d'Or at Cannes. 2 masterpieces in a single year. One made him famous, the other reminded the industry he was an artist. He returned for Jurassic Park 3 in 2001, stepping back into the boots of Alan Grant with the ease of a man putting on a comfortable jacket. But the years in between had been filled with quieter, more personal choices. Event Horizon, In the Mouth of Madness, the television miniseries Merlin, which earned him a Golden Globe nomination. He was not chasing blockbusters. He was choosing stories that interested him, and he was building a life that had nothing to do with Hollywood. And then, in 2013, a different kind of role found him. Stephen Knight, the creator of Peaky Blinders, was looking for someone to play Major Chester Campbell, the terrifying antagonist sent to Birmingham to destroy Tommy Shelby. For once in his career, Sam Neill was the creator's first choice. Knight said it plainly. Neill brought a cold, menacing authority to the role that made every scene feel like a coiled spring about to snap. In 2022, He returned to the franchise that had defined him. Jurassic World Dominion reunited him with Laura Dern and Jeff Goldblum for the first time since the original film, nearly 30 years earlier. Three old friends back in the tall grass. He said that working with them again was the primary reason he agreed to come back. Not the money, not the nostalgia, the people. But the cameras only ever showed half the man. Sam Neill's heart was never really in Hollywood. It was 12,000 miles away, on a piece of land in central Otago, New Zealand, where the mountains meet the sky, and the silence is so complete you can hear the vines growing. In 1993, the same year Jurassic Park made him a global star, he did something that baffled his Hollywood agents. He bought a farm. He planted grapes. He named it Two Paddocks. While other actors were buying mansions in Malibu and dining at Chateau Marmont, Sam Neill was learning how to prune Pinot Noir vines and reading about soil composition. Two Paddocks became his sanctuary, his identity, and eventually one of New Zealand's most respected boutique wineries. Certified organic, 4 vineyard sites. He focused on Pinot Noir and Riesling, wines that required patience and precision, qualities he brought to everything he touched. "I was never interested in producing wines that were obvious," he once said. "I wanted understatement, length, and ageability. It's always been about provenance and integrity." He even named one of his vineyards the Fusilier, after his father's regiment, a quiet tribute to the man who had brought him home. He was a man who valued the private over the public. "I understand acting, and I understand actors," he said. "I don't really understand the world of celebrity. That's just bizarre. Those sorts of elements I'm at sea with." His personal life carried the same quiet complexity. He met New Zealand actress Lisa Harrow in the early 1980s during the filming of The Omen 3. They had a son together, Tim, born in 1983. The relationship ended in 1989. That same year, on the set of Dead Calm, he met Japanese makeup artist Noriko Watanabe. They married quickly, and their daughter Elena was born in 1991. Neill also adopted Noriko's daughter from a previous marriage, Maiko. For 27 years they built a life together, raising 3 children between 2 hemispheres. The marriage ended in 2017, and Neill, characteristically, never spoke a word about it publicly. He had a 3-year relationship with Australian journalist Laura Tingle from 2018 to 2021. They remained close friends afterward. He never made his love life a headline. He never turned his pain into content. What he did talk about was what mattered. He once reflected on life with a simplicity that cut right through the noise. "If I've made a film that turns out to be good, that's a good result. If I've made a film that's good and made a couple of friends, that's a great result. If I've made a film that's no good, but I made a friend, that's still another great result." He talked about his children with a tenderness that surprised interviewers who expected Hollywood cynicism. He planted trees for his grandchildren. He cooked dinner with his own wine. He walked his dogs through the central Otago Hills and watched the light change over the schist rock formations that he said reminded him every single day why he had chosen this life over the one Hollywood wanted him to live. And then, in March of 2022, the light went out. Sam Neill was diagnosed with stage 3 angioimmunoblastic T-cell lymphoma, a rare and aggressive blood cancer that most people have never heard of. The word aggressive doesn't do it justice. This was the kind of cancer that doesn't negotiate. It moves fast, it spreads wide, and the survival rates are the kind of numbers no doctor wants to say out loud. He began chemotherapy immediately. He called it a pretty miserable business, which, if you knew Sam Neill, was probably the understatement of the century. He was living in a small flat in Melbourne, waiting for doctor updates, trying to fill the hours between treatments that left him hollowed out and exhausted. He hadn't been to his farm in months. He missed his vines. He missed his dogs. He missed the silence of Central Otago. It was during this period that he began to write. Not because he had a book deal, not because he had a plan, because he had nothing else to do, and the prospect of sitting still with his own mortality was unbearable. Suddenly, for the first time in my life, I have time to burn, and time to think, he wrote. And writing, jotting thoughts and memories down, is a salve. It gets my mind off things. He thought it might be his last chance to leave something behind for his children and grandchildren. He opened the memoir with a line that stopped readers in their tracks. "The thing is, I'm crook, possibly dying. I may have to speed this up." The chemotherapy stopped working. The cancer came back. His doctors told him there was one option left, an experimental treatment called CAR T-cell therapy. The process was extraordinary. They extracted T cells from his blood, sent them to a laboratory where they were genetically reprogrammed to recognize and attack his specific cancer cells, multiplied them into the millions, and then infused them back into his body. It was science fiction made real. It was his last shot. And it worked. The reprogrammed cells hunted the cancer through his bloodstream like a search and destroy mission. The tumors shrank. The blood counts normalized. By early 2026, Sam Neill was declared completely cancer-free. He went back to his farm. He planted something. He slept in his own bed. "Now I'm back among these peaceful vines," he said, "and I couldn't be happier." His memoir, Did I Ever Tell You This?, was published in 2023 and became an international bestseller. It was funny, honest, and unafraid. When asked if he feared death, he answered with the kind of clarity that only comes from having stared it down. "I'm not afraid to die, but it would annoy me, because I'd really like another decade or two, you know. But as for the dying, I couldn't care less." He had beaten the odds. He had outrun the thing that was supposed to kill him. And for a brief, beautiful window, it seemed like the man who had always been lucky enough to get the part at the last minute had gotten lucky one more time. On July 13th, 2026, Sam Neill died in a hospital in Sydney, Australia. He was 78 years old. The cause of death was pneumonia, not cancer, pneumonia. The cruel irony was almost too much to bear. A man who had survived 5 years of war against one of the most aggressive cancers in existence, who had undergone experimental treatment that most patients never get the chance to try, who had been declared cancer-free and had gone home to his farm to live the rest of his life in peace, was taken by a respiratory infection. His immune system, ravaged by years of chemotherapy and the very treatment that had saved him, simply couldn't fight one more battle. His family released a statement describing his death as sudden and unexpected. They confirmed he was completely cancer-free at the time of his passing. They asked for privacy and announced that a private memorial would be held at his farm in New Zealand. At 2 Paddocks, among the vines, his agent, Philip Grens, had to step forward to correct the media, which had immediately filled with what he called inaccuracies and outright falsehoods about the cause of death. The cancer hadn't come back. The cancer had nothing to do with it. Sam Neill had beaten the cancer. And then something else had come, quietly, without warning, and taken him anyway. The tributes that followed told you everything about the man behind the characters. Steven Spielberg said, "I adored making all the Jurassic movies with him. Along with Laura Dern and Jeff Goldblum, we will always have our Jurassic family, and Sam will never be forgotten by us or his many millions of fans around the world." Laura Dern called him her beloved lifetime friend and dream leading man. She wrote, "He showed me the depths of loyalty, protectiveness, and love, always with the driest of wit. He was a true and noble gentleman. I will love you forever, Dr. Alan Grant." Jeff Goldblum posted a series of behind-the-scenes photos with the words, "The next great adventure begins. Love, always and forever." Sam Neill once said something about himself that was, perhaps, the most honest summary a man could give of his own life. He said, "You are unique. There is only one you, and that is you there, right here, for better or worse. Except that there is no better, and there is no worse. It's just you." He was never the first choice for anything. He said it himself, without bitterness, without resentment, with the amused acceptance of a man who had learned that the path doesn't have to be straight to be beautiful. But he became the choice that no one ever regretted. He became the quiet man in the tall grass who made you believe that dinosaurs were real, that New Zealand was the most beautiful place on earth, and that a good glass of Pinot Noir, shared with good friends on a farm at the bottom of the world, was worth more than every award in Hollywood. He didn't die of cancer. He beat the cancer. And maybe that's the part of his story we should carry with us. Not the ending, but the fight. Not the silence, but the words he left behind. "I'm not afraid to die," he said, "but it would annoy me." It annoys us too, Sam. It annoys us too. If Sam Neill's story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We'll continue telling the stories of the real people behind the Hollywood legends, the ones who deserve to be remembered not for their fame, but for the way they lived. I'll see you in the next one.